Good morning, students. I welcome all of you in this session of English language. Students, in the previous session, we started the first poem, Cherry Tree, written by Ruskin Bond. In this session, in the first part of the poem, we saw that the poet had placed the seed of cherry in the grass, and at the end of May, in the summer season, he saw that the tree had come to stay. In this way, the cherry tree struggled upward, and when the poet returned from Kashmir, he saw 6 feet high cherry tree. So this is what we saw in the first part of the poem. Now let us look at the second part of the poem. I read the poem, second part of the poem.
Let us look at page number 67. I lay on the grass at ease, looking up through leaves at the blue, blind sky at the finches as they flew, and flitted through the dappled green, while bees in an ecstasy drank of nectar from each bloom, and the sun sank swiftly, and the stars turned in the sky, and moon moths and singing crickets, and I praised night and stars and tree, that small the cherry grown by me. So in this way, students, I have read the second part of the poem. I again repeat the first two lines from the second part. I lay on the grass at ease, looking up through leaves at the blue. So in this way, the poet wants to say that in his ecstasy, the poet lay on grass whole day at leisure to look up to the cherry tree. So here these two lines convey the sense of joy and peace in the mind of the poet. Blind sky at the finches as they flew and flitted through the dappled green. So when the poet lays on the grass, he looks up to the cherry tree as the finches is a bird eating the seeds. So these birds flew past, and birds flocked in and out of the tree, and the bees drank nectar from each bloom, and the sun sank swiftly, and the stars turned in the sky. So in this way, soon it was dark, and stars lit the whole night sky, and the moon moths means nocturnal insects. So moths and crickets sang at the night. So in this way, as the poet enjoyed the scene, the situation of nature, and felt himself overjoyed, he marveled or wondered at his own creation. So let us look at the last two lines. Yes, I praised night and stars and tree, that small the cherry grown by me. So in this way, the poet wondered at his own creation as he had placed the seed of cherry before 8 years. The small cherry plant that has grown into a big tree over the span of 8 years. So, in the ending couplet, the poet associates himself with the nature and creator as he takes pride for being a part of it. If you look at the last two lines, yes, I praised night and stars and tree, that small the cherry grown by me. So, this is what we have discussed in the second part of the poem, Cherry Tree. Students, now let us discuss the figures of speech in the poem Cherry Tree. So if you look at the second line, since I placed my cherry seed in the grass. So in this line we have the figure of speech alliteration, because in this line both the words since and seed begin with the same sound, that is sir, and therefore this line is an example of alliteration. Let us look at line number 4. And watered it once and went to bed. So this line is also an example of alliteration. Both the words watered and went begin with the same sound, that is were, and therefore this line is an example of alliteration. Let us see the line, and suddenly that summer near the end of May. This line also has the figure of speech alliteration. Let us look at both the words suddenly and summer. Let us see the next line. I found a tree had come to stay. This line is an example of personification, because in this line the poet has attributed the human quality of staying to the tree, and therefore this line is an example of personification. Students, let us look at the next lines. It was very small, 5 months child, lost in the tall grass, running wild. So together, if these two lines are given, these lines are example of the figure of speech antithesis, because in this line we have two opposite words, small and tall. When two opposite ideas or thoughts placed in the line, that line is considered to be an example of the figure of speech antithesis. Let us look at the next line. Goats ate the leaves, the grass cutter sighed. So this line is also an example of alliteration, because in this line we have two words, goats and grass. Both the words begin with the same sound, go, and therefore this line is an example of alliteration. Look at the next line. The young tree struggle upward thirst. So this line is an example of personification, because in this line the human quality of struggling has been attributed to a tree, and therefore this line is an example of the figure of speech personification. Its arms in a fresh fierce lust. This line is example of two figures of speech, alliteration and personification. In this line we have two words, fresh and fierce, which begin with the same sound, that is fur, and therefore we have alliteration in this line. Secondly, the tree has been attributed the human quality of having arms, and therefore this line is also an example of the figure of speech personification. Let us come to the next page, page number 67. I read the line, who watched wandering while time and the rain. So this line also has the figure of speech alliteration. Let us look at the words watched and wandering. Both the words begin with the same sound, that is were, and therefore this line consists of the figure of speech alliteration. Next line, made a miracle from giving growing pain. This line also consists of the figure of speech alliteration. Let us look at the words made and miracle. Both the words begin with the same sound, that is ma. So there are so many instances of the figure of speech alliteration in this poem. So students, I expect you to find out the different types of figures of speech from the second part of the poem. So I hope you must have understood all the lines and figures of speech from the first part of the poem. So you need to find out the figures of speech from the lines in the second part of the poem, which today in today's session. So I hope you must have understood the poem from the beginning to the end. I conclude my lecture here. I stop here. Thank you.